growing up with that performance that is ingrained in me. About 4 to 5 years into building Hope Reins, I thought I was having a heart attack one day, ended up in the ER, and turned out I was having panic attacks, right? Because I was driving and driving and driving and going and going and going. And I think one of the biggest things that we've learned is that, our big vision is true hope and real healing for every child. And God wants true hope and real healing for me, and he wants it for you, and he wants it for our volunteers, and he wants it for our staff. And I was still performing. I was just performing for God.
Hey guys, Jimmy Larsh here, host of the Breakaway Talk podcast. Thank you for tuning in with us today. Please like, follow, and subscribe. And if you'd like to find out how you can partner with Breakaway Outreach to reach youth for Christ, you can check out our website at breakawayoutreach.com or look in the podcast notes and you will find the link to the website. So let's go ahead and jump into today's podcast episode. Thrilled that you're joining us. Today, we are honored to have on the Breakaway Talk podcast the founder and CEO of Hope Reins in Raleigh, North Carolina, Kim Tschirret. Hope Reins serves kids in crisis through a 38-acre ranch, rescued horses, and restoration in Christ, pairing hurting kids with rescued horses to find hope and healing in life. Kim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kim, as mentioned before we got the recording here, I have a daughter who loves Jesus and she loves horses. Mm-hmm. And she's a rider here in East Tennessee. And several years ago, she came to me and her mother and told us about your organization. Mm. And she was really excited about it. And the fact that Hope Reins partners love for Jesus and love for horses also while ministering to hurting kids. And she just thought that was the coolest thing. So she has been deeply inspired and impacted by your vision. And she shared that with us. And I'm, as a father, I'm thankful for the impact already, just the long distance impact that Hope Reins has had on my daughter, that she can take the passions that she has, the love that she has in life for Jesus and her passions and use them together in ministry. So I just want to thank you for what you guys do. And it's had a personal touch on our family.
Well, that is the kindest thing I've heard in a really long time. Please thank her for me. And there's no higher honor than, impacting a precious girl. So we're really grateful.
Yes, and this could end up being a therapy session for me. It's just full disclosure. So I'm self-diagnosed with a mild form of equinophobia, and I don't think I even say that word right. Equinophobia?
Oh, equine, but like horses?
So it's the fear of horses, right? Oh. Equinophobia. Okay. And I there's probably a phobia for fearing not pronouncing words right. And that's probably in this category too. But I say it's a mild one because I haven't been on a horse since 1996 in Hilton Head. My wife and I on our honeymoon, she got me to go riding one day and it was very pleasant, but I'm not comfortable around horses. So maybe some time over at the ranch at Hope Reins could help me out a little bit. I
would love it. Our horses are very sweet. And by the way, I got married in Hilton Head. So
you?
We have that in common. So, but yes.
Yeah. So, I'm not terrified of horses. I love watching them from a distance and I love their beauty and strength. I just get a little intimidated when I get around them. So,
well, they are 1,000-pound animals. So, very powerful. So that makes sense.
And I think I have the same affinity with killer whales, orcas.
Oh, well, yes.
I love the beauty and majesty of them as well, but I don't know that I'd want to go swimming with one.
Yeah, I would.
So I think it's pretty obvious. You are a horse lover. And it says in your bio that as a child, you didn't have Hope Reins or Jesus, but you did have a horse where you continually found comfort and safety. So could you tell us a little bit about your childhood and how your journey with horses became a personal journey of healing and unconditional love from your Heavenly Father?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Ohio in an upper middle class home that looked really great on the outside. My dad was a successful businessman and we didn't want for anything financially. But he was an alcoholic and very verbally and emotionally abusive. And so I just never knew safety as a little girl, and for people who have grown up living with addiction, it's very shameful and it's very hidden, right? And we were never allowed to talk about it. So it was just this chaos that would erupt and happen. And then we were never allowed to discuss it. And so I always felt a little crazy. Like, I know there's something not right, but I can't talk about it. And for whatever reason, I think probably because it looked good, my dad bought me a horse. And the barn and really being with my horse was the only time I ever really felt comforted and felt safe and like some peace, from that chaos. And my horse was really the only thing I ever whispered my secrets to and what was really happening in my life or how I was really feeling. And so it was a really special bond and special relationship for me. And my dad sold my horse when I went off to college. And I think kids that are in the midst of trauma, I think they do one of two things. I think they either kind of go inward, right, and maybe implode, or they perform. And I chose the performance route because I was just trying to get my dad's love and attention, right? Because I never got that unconditionally. And so I went down the performance route. I went to the college he wanted me to go to. I went into the career he wanted me to go into, just to try to be successful like he was so that I could make that connection. But there was an emptiness, right, in all of that because I was seeking the world for my value. And I just kept saying, well, when I get this job, then I'm going to be happy. Or when I move here, then I'm going to be happy. This kind of when then thing. And I was never happy. I never had that fulfillment. And right after, like probably right before I was getting engaged to my husband, I think God really started wooing me. And after we got married, we moved to Raleigh, and I just really wanted us to go to church. And that's where I heard that it's Jesus, and it was just the turning point, truly the turning point of my life was that moment and finding him. And I had a lot of healing to do, but it was really wonderful to know that there was somebody that loved me so much that they were willing to die for me.
So you had this defining moment of transformation in your life when you came to Christ. And then, so how much time goes by between becoming a follower of Jesus and then kind of reconciling with that childhood passion of horses and that love?
Yeah, well, it was probably about 6 years. It's funny. I always said I was a career person, right? For the reasons I said, and I always told myself, I'm never going to drive a minivan and I'm never going to stay home with my kids. But after I came to Jesus and I just realized like working was so empty for me. And that's what I did. And so I just spent this precious time, really being discipled and getting in the Word and in therapy and just really being present with and loving on my kids. And about 2008, well, maybe it was a little before that, 2007, I was at a women's conference, and the woman that was speaking asked the question, what is something that you used to love to do that you don't do anymore? Because I think that is equally as powerful for men, but for women, I think we wear so many hats, and when we have our life, I think we kind of put things to the side. And in that moment, horses popped in my head. And Jimmy, I hadn't thought about horses in 20 years. It was just, it was totally from God, because it was not something that I really think I would have thought of. And it kind of took me on this journey of trying to discover, God, what do you want me to do with horses? And I thought, am I meant to buy a horse? I started to take riding lessons again. And I tried all of these things. And then in 2009, I found a book about an organization in Oregon that was pairing kids and teens in crisis with horses that they had rescued. And it was just this moment where I said, this is it. Like I knew that was what God wanted me to do. And so, yeah. And so we started Hope Reins in 2010.
You know, I can so relate to that childhood passion. Mine was baseball. And, you know, by the time I got out of high school, really didn't play baseball much after that, but it was my very first childhood passion. And I remember around 2010 going on a mission trip and using baseball in Germany to share the gospel with kids. And God just used that to reconcile a childhood dream and passion with purpose.
Yeah.
And sharing the gospel with young people. And so that passion of baseball was resurrected in my life with a whole different meaning and purpose to it. So I can totally relate to what that would feel like with being reconnected, right? So horses come back into your life.
Yeah.
But with a new meaning, maybe a fresh revelation of how they can serve a purpose in your life. So tell us about how you were prompted to start Hope Reins. And I'm kind of curious, you know, the inspiration behind the movement and the ministry, but also the vision. You know, sometimes God gives vision and it's pretty clear to people up front what it's going to look like 3 to 5 years, 8 to 10, you know, whatever. For me, it was a little bit different. God gives it piece by piece, you know, so what prompted you to start Hope Reins? And then also, you know, how did that vision play out? How did it take shape? Was it mostly up front, or was it like small baby steps at a time and God giving you more, you know, as you take each step?
Yeah, great question. You know, it's interesting. I feel like over the last 15 to 17 years, including like the startup phase, God gives a vision, and then there's usually a time of waiting. That's kind of what we've experienced. And I think in starting Hope Reins, I think, like I mentioned, that kind of that moment of horses popping into my head to me was the start, because I knew God had something for me to do prior to that. I just felt the sense, you know, it was, I can't explain it other than it was just a sense. And there was no like exact, this is what it's going to be. But I just felt like, okay, Lord, I feel like I need to start seeking you for whatever you're doing inside of me. And that's when this idea of horses popped into my head. And I started trying some different things over the span of probably 18 months before I found the book. And I think for me, that book and that organization, it's a phenomenal organization in Oregon. They've been around for a really long time. That was like the inspiration, right? I could see what they were doing, and it really felt like that was what God was wanting us to do here in Raleigh. But the funny thing is, what wasn't funny at the time, but looking back on it is, I don't know if you remember in 2009, 2010, like we were in a really significant recession.
Yes.
And everybody kept telling me, you're crazy. You can't start a nonprofit. Businesses are going under, you know, all of the issues. And the main thing everybody kept saying is you'll never find land, because we are kind of in the suburbs, but, you know, there's a lot of building and houses, and there isn't a lot of like unused property. And my husband and I went on an Easter egg hunt at this church that just happened to own the 70-acre former cow farm, dairy farm. And it was this whisper from the Holy Spirit of, what is this place? It was all this pasture and moon bounces and all the stuff that was happening. And I just went in and I wrote a marketing plan. That's my background, is in marketing. So I wrote this like business plan and went in just thinking, oh, I'll get some good feedback from these people, you know, to give me some direction. And Jimmy, he literally gave us 20 acres on the spot and said, for $1 a month, here you go. So we were not incorporated. We didn't have a name. I didn't even know we were moving forward. And so it was like the one thing God said, or I'm sorry, the one thing people kept saying, you'll never find, was the first thing that God took out of the way for us. And we've really been kind of running to keep up ever since.
Well, God knew what he was doing. He was already in the process of incorporating, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I find so cool? This just comes to my memory as you shared that story. Someone inspired you, right?
Yes.
You read a book but there was some seeds planted. I remember just a couple of years ago, we were at a conference in Asheville, and it was a conference for about 80 camp workers people who work with children at risk or ACEs, kids affected by childhood experiences. Mm-hmm. And I remember at that conference, I met a couple, and you might even know who this is. I don't remember their name, but I think they were from Pennsylvania, maybe Ohio. But I remember them saying when we were hanging out at that conference that they were going over to Raleigh to visit Hope Reins.
Oh, wow.
Because they had started a small ministry with horses up their way. And they were going to Hope Reins to get their inspiration and their fuel.
That's really cool.
Because of the impact that you had. So it's just beautiful to see how God uses, us to plant those seeds in others. We get inspired, and then others get inspired by us. And it's just beautiful. The contagion of that as God spreads vision. So let's talk about the community at Hope Reins. On your website, it says this, Hope Reins is a community of healing for kids in crisis. Mm-hmm. So tell our listeners how your program serves young people facing hardship, and maybe even walk through a little bit of the process in which a child would get connected with you. What the mentoring looks like. And also, I'm kind of interested in the unique or therapeutic threading, if you will, with kids and horses. Why is that so unique, and why is therapy found in that? I'm really personally curious about that as well.
Yeah. Well, so at Hope Reins, we pair kids and teens that have experienced pretty significant trauma and life crisis with horses that have been rescued themselves from their own abuse and neglect and abandonment and, you name it. And we really are a mentorship and a skills-based program. And so our number one core value at Hope Reins is that Jesus heals, right? Horses don't heal people. I don't heal anybody. Our mentors don't heal anybody. We're there to facilitate this beautiful relationship between a child and a horse and a mentor. And we're all about relationship. It's all about the connection and the relationship. And when kids first come to Hope Reins, their parents may hear about us through a teacher or a doctor or a therapist or even another family. In the last 15 years, 100% of the families we've served have said they would refer a child in need to Hope Reins, which is a pretty significant survey number. So lots of different ways that they find us. And then we go through an intake process. And once we determine that we're a good fit for them, then they come out for a tour. Because one of the most important things for us is that, these kids, they didn't have a voice in what happened to them, right? Their boundaries were run over. They did not have a voice in what happened to them. And so we want to make sure that they have a voice in coming to Hope Reins, right? And so it doesn't matter if they're 5 or 18, we are going to ask them the question, and we're going to take them on a tour, and then we're going to say, do you want to be here, right? Do you want to participate and be a part of our program? And it doesn't happen often, but sometimes kids say no because they're not ready, right? And if they don't say yes, they're not ready to heal. And so we want to really honor that in them, the same way we do with our horses, and really treat them that way. And so if you came to our ranch, I think the first thing people often will say is it's so peaceful and I feel really safe here. For people who maybe don't know Jesus, they will say things like, there's something here that I feel. And I feel so much peace and I feel so calm and I don't know what it is that's here, right? And so, and I think we try to do a really good job of taking really good care of the ranch and our horses because we want our families to know, oh, they're going to take good care of our kids too. And so our staff is really good stewards of what we have. And again, we take them on a tour, and a lot of times a kid has either looked on the website or they connect with a certain horse's story. Sometimes horses choose kids. That's a very special moment when that happens. And then they embark on this time period where they come weekly for a 90-minute session, and they're paired with the same horse and the same mentor every single week. And the 4 things horses teach humans, which is really interesting, are trust, communication, boundaries, and leadership. And those just happen to be the 4 resiliency skills that we're working on building for kids. And so a session looks like, working on different skills, getting our horse out, doing a chore, maybe some arts and crafts. It's really, led by the spirit and up to the child. But yeah, you asked about why horses, right? Horses. I know you said you're a little fearful. Have you ever heard somebody say, "Don't let them know you're scared"?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you think they say that?
I don't know, but I got a feeling that they know anyway.
Yeah, there's proven scientific studies that horses most of the time sense what we're feeling before our brain has even registered what we're feeling. So if you walk up to a horse and you are feeling anxious or sad or angry, or and you haven't even really processed like what you're feeling, they're already sensing that. That's how incredibly sensitive they are to human moods and emotions and their environment, because they're prey animals and they always want to know, am I safe? Right. Mm-hmm. And so they're constantly kind of assessing what's happening. And horses live in the moment. They don't live in tomorrow. They don't have anxiety. They don't have anxiety about tomorrow or what's going to happen. They live in the present moment. And so when you're working with them, you have to really like know where you are and your feelings and really regulate that. And they kind of can mirror that. And then they lower your heart rate and anxiety and depression. And, so those are some of the physical, reasons. And then I think just working with a horse that's gone through what you've gone through is the bridge for a lot of our kids that have been hurt by people. So it really opens up a great opportunity for us.
That is amazing. Well, we serve kids here in East Tennessee that have been impacted by trauma and hardship. And we've been running a summer camp and a winter camp for 18 years now. And another program that we have is what we call Kid Ventures. And we take kids on adventure weekend retreats and trips, just any kind of adventure that would be stimulating, or we've never done the horses. And the closest thing we've come, I think, is our NASCAR trip. So like the Mustangs, the 600 horsepower. That's our only connection with kids and horses is the NASCAR trip we do every year.
The pony, my son has one, so the Mustang. So
yeah, and going around the track, so fast, but they don't. It doesn't seem like it's got the same connection. It's just loud and anyway. Most of the discussion comes after we leave the track, right?
Yeah.
But I love that, and the thing that really gets to my heart is the resiliency.
Yeah.
And that was my story. I came to know Jesus while I was locked up as a teenager. Yeah. And it was a man that became not just a mentor for me, but really a spiritual father. Mm-hmm. I came from a similar situation of abuse as a young person, and verbally, physically, and just had lost all my dignity as a young person. Mm-hmm. But I found resiliency in a person who stood in my corner and made a difference in my life. So of course, you fast forward years later, decades later, all my entire adult life, it's been serving kids. And I love those stories of resiliency, the change, the transformation. We just had a young man in Germany with us on his first mission trip. He came to our camp when he was 9 years old, both parents locked up in prison. And over the last 13 years, he's found a community with Breakaway, and he was baptized at camp, and he's grown into a tremendous leader. But then seeing him go across the pond, over into Europe now and on his first mission trip and serving, what a beautiful picture of resiliency. So and I love that when I see a child that has overcome such enormous odds, right? And I'm sure you maybe you've written a book already on this, right? Because you probably have so many stories. Share with our listeners maybe one or two, or whatever stories that are really in your heart, that picture the epitome of resiliency through Hope Reins.
Well, I want to just, before I do that, if it's okay with you, I want to just, you may be familiar with the Harvard study that they did on resiliency with kids. And what they said is they studied thousands of kids, and they said kids who do not heal from their childhood trauma oftentimes become the homeless, the incarcerated, the drug addicted, mentally ill. They've tied all of these things. And when they looked at what a kid really needed in their trauma to help build resiliency was just the ability to bounce back, right? And have good coping skills. They actually said the number one thing is one safe adult relationship, which is what happened to you.
Wow.
And that's what happens with our kids. It starts with a horse and then it moves on to their mentor. But that mentorship and that connection and having somebody just believe in you and be there for you it's life transforming, really, for kids. It really is. And yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, so many stories. But what's exciting right now is that we're embarking on our 15th anniversary, and we're working with 15 adults that were kids in our program. Okay, they're all adults now. They're all thriving. They all have jobs or went to college or the military, like did all of these things, and just to hear first of all, how excited they are and how much they want to talk about Hope Reins and the impact that it had. It changed my life. It saved my life. Like, I wouldn't be where I am today without it. And some of those kids are doing what you did, Jimmy. They're giving back and working with kids and giving back what they received at Hope Reins. There's one girl story in particular. Her name is Ashley, and she worked with one of our horses named Buddy, and she had just debilitating anxiety, like so bad that she didn't want to live. She wanted to take her life, and she was on like 6 or 7 different medications just to try to make it through the day, to even attempt to try to get to school. And her mom had tried everything, and she was desperate in the doctor's office in tears when one of the nurses all of a sudden just said, "Have you ever thought about equine therapy? Like, I hear that it's helpful." She didn't even say Hope Reins. She just said equine therapy. And her mom did some research and found us, and Ashley was in our program a short while later, and it just really transformed her life. She's off all of her medication, doesn't deal with debilitating anxiety anymore, and she actually ended up while she was still in our program speaking at one of our luncheons that we had in front of 300 people and sharing her story. So imagine going from debilitating anxiety to being able to step up. And she was one of the founding members of our Kids Give Back program, which is our volunteer program. So after kids go through our program, if they want to, they can stay and volunteer and build their leadership skills. So that's a really sweet and exciting story.
So let's shift to leadership. And I know you've been at this for a while now. So you've had your leadership tools tried and tested, I would imagine, with your vision and your ministry. So a lot of our listeners are encouraged by hearing stories about the ups and downs, the disappointments, the wins, the frustrations, the successes, everything, right? The whole gamut in ministries like ours. So let's shift the conversation to leadership. And the first question I want to ask about this is, what challenges or struggles did you face getting the ministry going? Did you face some real strong obstacles that, were heavy challenges for you, or maybe even some things that have come along the way, whether it's wins, losses, successes, or disappointments? What could you say were some struggles that you had to face in starting this ministry?
Well, I mean, I could say all the things that I'm sure people would be expecting, like, of course, we've had money issues. Of course, we've had, not enough resources, not enough staffing, and we've had horses pass away. I mean, we've had some hard things. But if I'm really honest and vulnerable, I think I have probably been my own worst obstacle, because growing up with that performance that is ingrained in me. About 4 to 5 years into building Hope Reins, I thought I was having a heart attack one day, ended up in the ER, and turned out I was having panic attacks, right? Because I was driving and driving and driving and going and going and going. And I think one of the biggest things that we've learned is that, our big vision is true hope and real healing for every child. And God wants true hope and real healing for me, and he wants it for you, and he wants it for our volunteers, and he wants it for our staff. And I was still performing. I was just performing for God, because I still didn't believe Jesus, I thank you for my salvation, but God the Father, I'm not okay with you yet, right? Because I just have this huge father wound, right? Just from the way I grew up. And so it was really realizing that God doesn't need me to do anything, and that I needed to walk differently, right? And I needed to stop performing, which is not easy. I'm not saying I still do it today, and I don't even realize it because it's, again, so ingrained. But it was that shift of, oh, I recognize this. This is not the route that I want to take, and and really just putting him first, letting him lead, trusting him, and being patient and waiting, which is not in my DNA.
Yeah. And you may have answered my follow-up question to that, which was, how has God grown your relationship with him
Oh my goodness.
through this faith journey? Yeah. So what has that looked like?
Yeah, I think it's just the kindness of the Lord, that he's so in the details, like the things that he's done, that have shown his love for me. It just blows me away. It just totally blows me away. And just the way he's redeemed, not just my general story, but the intimate details of my story, the things that I always desired and wanted as a kid that I have now, because of how he's redeemed my story, is just really amazing.
What about this one? In what ways has God used hurting kids to grow you as a leader?
Yeah. Well, I think anytime you're ministering and mentoring to a kid, you're learning so much, like God's teaching you about yourself, right? But I think for me, what the kids really are my fuel in the fire, right? Because the enemy wants not just me, but all of us to quit, right? But what I hear a lot of times is, oh, it's not making a difference. This is too hard. You just need to stop. And so being at the ranch, hearing the parents share, hearing the kids share, hearing their stories is the fuel in the fire that just really keeps me going, right? That makes sure that we have the money that we need and that we're serving all the kids that we need. And so it really, for me, is, I think, a catalyst and the fuel of the fire.
You have, I'm assuming for a lot of your adult life, worked with rescue horses. You've been rescuing kids, a lot of situations and stories that have been triumphant, probably been some heartache too, but you have a rescue message. You have rescue experience. Maybe there's someone that's listening right now and they're just struggling with waking up tomorrow.
Yeah.
With what life has handed me. And we're talking about hurting kids. Maybe there's some hurting kids, but maybe there's some hurting adults out there as well that are listening to this and just really going through a storm right now, a difficulty in life, and they need encouragement. What would be your rescue message to someone right now that feels all alone? Maybe they don't even feel that God is in their corner, or they're not worthy to have a relationship with God. What would be your rescue message to a person maybe that is feeling that right now?
I guess I would probably, I've been there. In fact, I've been there very recently, and some really challenging circumstances in my personal life that is kind of like in Mark, Jesus sleeping in the boat, and his disciples are like, "We're drowning. Don't you care? Can't you see?" And so I've really been there. But I think I would tell them that there is a God that loves them very, very much and cares deeply, deeply about them, and that they're not alone. It's the same thing we tell our kids: you're not alone, and you have a purpose, and you matter, right? You matter to God. He created you for a reason to be here, just because he loves you, and just encourage them to find some help and some support, because you can't do it by yourself. Isolation is a tool of the enemy, and he wants to isolate us. He wants us to feel like we're all alone and nobody cares about us. But there are people out there that they can connect with, and I just encourage them not to be alone.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. This has been very enlightening and refreshing of a conversation for me, and I'm sure people that are listening as well.
Well, thank you for having me on. It was a real pleasure.